What if I told you that one of the most common pieces of advice in all of ice fishing is a trap? That the rule you've heard from old-timers and seen in magazines is actively costing you fish? We're talking about the famous 10-minute rule of hole hopping. The idea that if you don't mark a fish or get a bite in 10 minutes, you pack up and drill again. Today we're going to tear that rule apart. I'm going to show you why staying put a little longer might be the secret to icing more fish than you ever thought possible. We'll dive into why so many anglers fail, and it has nothing to do with their bait or their gear. It's about time and noise. So let me ask you right now, and be honest, are you a die-hard hole hopper, moving every 10 minutes on the dot? Or do you prefer to wait it out? Let me know in the comments below, and let's get into it. Let's be real, the idea of hole hopping makes a lot of sense on the surface. Nobody wants to sit on a dead hole, staring at a blank screen or a motionless bobber. It feels like you're wasting precious time on the ice. Moving, drilling, and staying active feels productive. It feels like you're hunting the fish, not just waiting for them. This belief is everywhere. The pros on TV often show themselves running and gunning, hitting dozens of spots in a day. It creates this image that success is tied to constant motion. But this overlooks a critical piece of the puzzle, the fish's perspective. For years we've been conditioned to think that if fish are there, they'll bite immediately. We're going to challenge that core belief today by looking at what actually happens under the ice the moment you fire up that auger. First, let's officially define the golden rule we're here to challenge. The advice, as most of us have heard it, is simple. Drill a hole, drop your line, and give it 10 to 15 minutes. If you see no signs of life, no marks on the flasher, no bites, nothing, it's time to move on. The logic is based on efficiency. The theory is that you can cover more water and intersect with more active schools of fish by constantly moving rather than waiting in one place. On paper, it sounds like a numbers game that should be in your favor. More holes equals more chances. This is the foundation of the run and gun style of ice fishing, and for many it's the only way they know how to fish. They see patience as laziness and staying in one spot as admitting defeat. But this approach treats fish like static targets, completely ignoring how they react to our presence. Now let's talk about the biggest problem with constant movement, the noise. Think about what a lake is like under the ice. It's a quiet, muffled world. The fish are tuned into the subtle sounds of their environment. Then you arrive. The roar and vibration of an auger ripping through 2 feet of ice is a cataclysmic event in that silent world. It's not a dinner bell, it's an air raid siren. The sound travels incredibly far and fast through water and ice. To a fish, that intense vibration and sound screams danger. Their primary instinct, especially for larger, wiser fish like walleye, is not to swim towards the noise to investigate, but to either hunker down and become cautious or move away from the disturbance entirely. By drilling a new hole every 10 minutes, you are essentially surrounding yourself with a continuous bubble of noise and fear, acting like a fish repellent. Let's put ourselves in the fish's fins for a moment. Imagine you're a perch, casually swimming along the bottom, looking for invertebrates. Suddenly, the roof above you starts to shake violently, and a deafening roar fills your world. Then, a column of light shines down, and a strange, colorful object with hooks drops in. Are you going to immediately rush over and eat it? Probably not. You're going to be on high alert, cautious. You might swim over to take a look from a distance, but your guard is up. This is especially true for pressured fish on popular lakes. They've learned to associate the sound of an auger with danger. They don't make the connection that it also means food is coming. By leaving after just 10 minutes, you're pulling your lure out right when a cautious fish might have finally been calming down enough to consider biting. This brings us to a crucial concept, the settling in period. Every single time you drill a new hole, you need to account for the time it takes for the environment to return to a state of normalcy. The vibrations have to stop, the churned up slush and snow have to settle, and most importantly, the fish need to feel safe again. This settling in period is not 30 seconds. It can be 5, 10, or even 15 minutes, depending on the species, the water clarity, and how much fishing pressure the lake gets. If your entire waiting period is only 10 minutes, you might be spending the first 8 of those minutes just waiting for the fish to recover from the shock of your arrival. You're essentially fishing a dead zone that you yourself created, and then leaving just as it's starting to come back to life. It's a cycle of self-sabotage. Here's a perfect visual example to drive this home. Imagine standing at the edge of a perfectly calm, glass-still pond. Now, throw a big rock right in the middle. The impact creates a huge splash and sends ripples out in every direction, disturbing the entire surface. You wouldn't expect the water to be perfectly calm again in just a few seconds, would you? It takes time for those ripples to dissipate and for the surface to become still again. Drilling a hole in the ice is the exact same thing, but with sound and vibration instead of visible ripples. The ripples of your auger's noise spread out and disrupt the underwater world. Hole hopping every 10 minutes is like throwing another rock into the pond before the ripples from the first one have even settled. You're maintaining a constant state of disturbance. Another critical factor is the mood of the fish. Not every fish under the ice is in an aggressive feeding frenzy. Fish, just like people, have different moods. They can be positive and aggressive, neutral and indifferent, or negative and completely unwilling to feed. The aggressive fish are the ones that might hit your lure the second it drops, but they are often the smallest portion of the population. The majority of fish, especially the bigger, trophy class ones, are often in a neutral mood. They aren't actively hunting, but an easy meal presented correctly can trigger them to bite. These are the fish you are targeting by waiting. A 10-minute drop is only long enough to catch the hyper-aggressive fish. By staying longer, you give your presentation time to work on those neutral fish and persuade them into biting. Think about the power of attraction. What is your lure or jig actually doing down there? It's not just sitting there waiting to be eaten. Your jigging action, the flash of the spoon, the scent of the bait, all of these things are designed to draw fish in from a distance. A curious walleye might see the flash of your spoon from 20 or 30 feet away. It's not going to teleport to your lure. It's going to slowly, cautiously swim over to investigate. This takes time. It has to travel that distance, assess the situation, and then decide to commit. This entire process can easily take more than 10 minutes. If you pull your lure out after 9 minutes, you might be taking away a meal from a fish that was just about to arrive. You did all the work of calling it in, but you didn't stay long enough to close the deal. This is why the 10-minute time frame is such a fallacy. It's an arbitrary number that doesn't account for fish travel time or their adjustment period. Let's say a big, cautious perch is 30 feet away when you drop your lure. It might spend 2 minutes watching from a distance. Then it might take another 3 or 4 minutes to slowly circle and approach your lure. It might then just stare at it for another 5 minutes, deciding if it's safe to eat. Right there, you're already past the 10-minute mark. And that's for a fish that was relatively close by. For a fish that's 50 or 60 feet away, it takes even longer. The 10-minute rule completely ignores the reality of how fish behave and interact with a lure in their natural environment. It's a rule made for the fisherman's patience, not the fish's reality. Let's paint a very common real-life scenario. You're on the ice, you drill a hole over a promising piece of structure, you drop your jig down and start working it. The flasher is blank. 5 minutes go by. Nothing. 8 minutes. Still nothing. You're starting to get that familiar itch. You think to yourself, this spot is dead, I'm wasting my time. At the 10-minute mark, you reel up, frustrated, and start walking to your next spot. What you couldn't see is that a 26-inch walleye, spooked by your drilling, had hunkered down on the bottom 20 feet away. After 5 minutes, it noticed the subtle thump of your jig. It spent the next 5 minutes slowly cruising in, eyes locked on your bait, just about to strike when it vanished. You were literally 1 minute away from a trophy fish, but your impatience cost you the bite. The best proof against the 10-minute rule comes from modern electronics, especially live sonar technology like Panoptix or Megalive. Anglers using this tech can watch in real time how fish react, and what they see time and time again is eye-opening. They'll drill a hole, the screen will be blank, and then, after 10, 12, even 20 minutes of steady jigging, a school of crappies or a big walleye will slowly materialize on the edge of the screen and start moving in. These electronics provide undeniable visual evidence that fish are often drawn in from a distance and take a significant amount of time to commit. Before this technology, we were just guessing. Now we can see it with our own eyes. Patience is not just a virtue in ice fishing, it's a proven, effective tactic. So, if the 10-minute rule is out, what's the new rule? When should you actually move? The answer is, there is no single fixed time. Instead of watching the clock, you need to start reading the signs. It's about making an informed decision based on what the fish and your electronics are telling you, not based on an arbitrary number. The goal isn't just to be patient, it's to be strategically patient. Some holes might deserve an hour of your time, while others might only deserve 15 minutes. The key is to know what to look for, and the first and most important sign is what you're seeing, or not seeing, on your fish finder. That screen is your window into the underwater world, and it holds the answer to whether you should stay or go. Let's talk about the first and most obvious sign that it's time to go. You see absolutely nothing. I'm not talking about 10 minutes of nothing. I mean you give a spot a solid 20, maybe even 30 minutes of dedicated effort. You've jigged aggressively to attract fish, you've tried finesse techniques to trigger a bite, and your flasher or graph remains completely blank. You're not marking bait fish, you're not marking suspended fish, you're not marking anything on the bottom. In this situation, you can be reasonably confident that there are either no fish in the immediate area, or they are so inactive that they're glued to the bottom and not showing up. In this case, yes, it's absolutely time to move. You've given the spot a fair shot and it's not producing any signs of life. The second key sign is what I call lookers, not takers. This is a very different scenario. You drop your lure down and almost immediately you start marking fish. They swim in, inspect your lure, follow it up and down as you jig, but they absolutely will not bite. They just stare at it. You try changing your jigging cadence, you switch colors, you downsize your lure, you add live bait, and they still refuse to commit. If you spend 20 or 30 minutes with multiple fish showing interest but none of them biting, that's a strong signal. It tells you that you found fish, which is great, but they are in a negative or neutral mood. In this case, moving is often the right call. It's better to leave these uncooperative fish and go search for a school that is in a more active feeding mood. This leads us to a better approach we can call the strategic wait. Instead of a rigid 10 minutes, your new baseline for a promising spot should be at least 20 to 30 minutes. This gives you enough time for the area to settle down after drilling. It gives fish from a distance enough time to be attracted to your lure and move in to investigate. And it gives you enough time to cycle through a few different lures or presentations to figure out what the fish want. Think of it as an investment. The first 10 minutes are for settling and attracting. The next 10 to 20 minutes are your prime time, when your chances of getting a bite are actually at their highest. By leaving before this window even opens, you're missing the best opportunity. Now, it's important to mention that there is an exception to this rule, and that's when you're targeting hyper-aggressive panfish like schooled-up crappies or bluegills. In this very specific situation, a faster run-and-gun approach can be extremely effective. Why? Because you're not trying to convince one or two cautious fish to bite. You're trying to locate a massive competitive school of fish. When you find them, the competition within the school means they often bite instantly. So for this style of fishing, drilling multiple holes and dropping down for just a few minutes in each one is a valid tactic for locating the mega school. But, and this is a huge but, this tactic does not translate well to fishing for more solitary, cautious predators. When you're targeting fish like walleye, big perch or lake trout, the patient approach is almost always superior. These fish are often less numerous and more wary than a big school of crappies. A trophy walleye is old and smart for a reason. It didn't get that big by recklessly charging toward every loud noise and flashy object it saw. It got big by being cautious. These are the fish that are most likely to be spooked by your drilling and most likely to take their time investigating your lure before committing. Applying the fast-paced crappie fishing mindset to walleye fishing is a recipe for frustration. You'll spend all day drilling holes and spooking the very fish you're trying to catch. For these predators, you have to slow down and let them come to you on their own terms. We also have to acknowledge the mental game. Hole hopping feels good. It makes you feel like you're being proactive and working hard. Sitting still, on the other hand, can feel like you're being lazy or giving up. It requires mental discipline to sit at a seemingly dead hole and have faith in your spot. This is a huge psychological hurdle for many anglers to overcome. They get restless and anxious, but you have to fight that urge. You have to trust the process. Understand that just because your flasher is blank right now doesn't mean it will be in 5 minutes. True productivity on the ice isn't measured by the number of holes you drill, it's measured by the number of fish you catch. And sometimes the most productive thing you can do is absolutely nothing. So what's a practical, better strategy? I call it cluster hopping. Instead of drilling one hole and fishing it, then running 50 yards to drill another, you focus on a small, high percentage area. For example, a point, an inside turn, or a weed edge. In that one small zone, drill a cluster of 3 to 5 holes, maybe 15 to 20 feet apart from each other. Fish the first hole for 20 minutes. If it's slow, don't leave the area entirely. Just quietly walk over to the next hole you already drilled. This approach has several huge advantages. You get all your loud, disruptive drilling done at once, and then you can fish the area quietly for the next hour or two. It's a perfect compromise between staying put and staying mobile. The beauty of the cluster hopping method is that it allows each hole to have a rest period. While you're fishing in hole number 1, holes 2, 3, and 4 are settling down. The fish that were spooked by the drilling are calming down and returning to their normal behavior. By the time you move from hole 1 to hole 2, that second hole has been quiet for a full 20 minutes. You're essentially dropping your lure into a calm, undisturbed environment. This dramatically increases your chances of getting a bite from a fish that is relaxed and not on high alert. You're working smarter, not harder. You're letting time and silence work for you, instead of constantly working against yourself with the noise of the auger. So, let's bring it all together for the final verdict. The rigid 10-minute hole hopping rule is a deeply flawed concept for most fishing situations. It's a rule born from impatience that completely ignores the fundamental behavior of fish and the massive impact of our noise and presence. It prioritizes the feeling of being busy over the strategy of being effective. A much better approach is to practice strategic patience. Give a new hole a minimum of 20 minutes to settle down and attract fish. Learn to read the signs on your electronics to decide when it's truly time to go. And consider using a cluster hopping strategy to maximize the potential of a good spot while minimizing noise. Ditching the 10-minute rule might just be the single biggest change you can make to improve your success on the ice. So, the big takeaway is this, that 10-minute rule we've all been taught isn't a rule at all. It's a guideline that often does more harm than good by spooking fish and not giving your spot enough time to produce. The most powerful, game-changing moment for any ice angler is when you stop thinking about the clock and start thinking about the fish. The real turning point is understanding that your auger is both a dinner bell and an alarm siren. You have to give the fish enough time to decide which one it is, and for most of them, that takes a lot longer than 10 minutes. This simple shift in mindset from frantic searching to strategic patience can be the difference between a skunk and your best day on the ice. Thank you so much for watching. If this video made you rethink your strategy, hit that like button and make sure you're subscribed for more content that breaks down old fishing myths. And for my final question, what's the longest you've ever waited at a single hole before a monster fish finally hit? Share your story of patience in the comments below.